right, hey there guys, Sam here from TradeDevils.com and TradeDevils-indicators.com. Today I am very excited to be introducing our latest release in our now very extensive catalog of tools and indicators for the Ninjatrader 8 platform. Now this is our footprint auto trader. So what I'm going to do here in a series of videos here is take you through the very basics of let's get it installed, let's go through the parameters so that you understand, because there's a lot of depth to this, a lot of options, a lot of different ways that you can use it. So this will be a multi-part series here, and this will likely be the driest and most boring, but we've got to go through this so that you understand how to use it. I can tell you with great certainty exactly what this is not. This is not a product, an auto trader that you can apply to your chart, turn it on, let it run, and at the end of the day head off to the bank to deposit your riches. That is not what it's intended to be. That's not what it does. So let's be very clear about that. This is designed to help you execute. And really what it's doing is processing information that you as the trader may not be able to identify as quickly as a piece of software will. There's very much a relationship between the trader that's driving this and the auto trader. So this is a tactile, you're going to make choices here based on your own interpretation of what the market is doing or where it may be headed, and you're going to interact with it continuously, would be my estimate based on your style. But my guess is you're going to be interacting with this repeatedly throughout the course of the day as the market ebbs and flows, trends, ranges, whatever it may be doing. It's going to help you at those decision points where, again, things can be happening within the footprint chart that you may not be able to process, again, as quickly as a piece of software will. So that's really what it's designed to do. It's more of a trader's assistant, if you will, rather than a dedicated auto trader per se. So with that said, and I think as we go through the series here, that will become more and more evident as you understand how to really benefit from this. Let's start with just the very basics, and that is you've downloaded it, and I'm going to assume you would trial it. So you've downloaded the trial, and you're going to go through the process that you've grown accustomed to of importing a zip file into Ninjatrader. Well, number one, what you're importing here with this is not an indicator. This is a strategy. So you're going to find it not in the list of indicators, you're going to find it in your list of strategies. Now, if you're just using the toolbar here, we're just going to go up to the strategies here. We're going to pop in and you'll see it down here, the TDU Footprint Auto Trader. Now, of course, I've already got it loaded onto the chart here. So again, what I thought I would do here in just this first introductory video here is just that we need to go through these parameters so that you understand, because again, as you'll see, there is a lot in here, and there's some of this you're going to want to tweak to your own trading style. And again, it will be very tactile, very much an interaction between you and what you're asking the auto trader to do for you as the day progresses. So with that said, on the assumption that you now know where to find it, because we've already had a few people trial it and saying, hey, I'm looking for it in indicators, I don't see it. No, it's going to be in your strategies. All right, so here we have it. Now, I currently have it enabled. I should also probably show you this. I'm going to disable it, which we can do right here in your control center. I'm just going to disable it, right? So and then I can enable and re-able here, which if you've used strategies before, that's kind of handy, right? You don't want to necessarily go into strategies, scroll down to enable. This is a quicker way to do it. Just again, many people may not be aware of that, but you can enable and disable it right in your control panel. So with that, so now you see it, once it's enabled, you're going to get this panel over here, which is where you're going to essentially tell it what to do, right? Starting with, is it running or not running? All right, are we paused or are we running? Then we're going to give you a lot of choices here about what you want to turn on or off, and whether you want to, how you want to manage that with regards to intra-bar or at the close of a bar. So for the time being, I'm going to keep it paused here. We'll look at this in a trending market, which for the most part, this is again, this would be a nuanced decision you would make based on what you see in the market. It could be, if you were switching from trending to ranging, that could be time of day. Middle of the day, things might slow down. You may, and perhaps you don't have a raging trend. Friday, which is all I'm doing. I'm just using Friday's data. Kind of a choppy day, right? A few false spurts up, down, but essentially it was a ranging day. But that I don't necessarily suggest that you do this on or off for the entire day. It's more periods of time where you might move from trending to ranging. So I'm going to suggest for most of you, in the purposes of trialing or getting used to it or learning how to work with it, you're likely going to want to keep this in trending for the most part of the day. But again, you do have that option to go to a ranging market. We'll circle back to that in a later video when we get to applications. So there we have it. So we know where to find it. It's installed. I'm assuming you've gone through that install process. Now you know how to find it up here. And now we're going to go through some of these parameters. So first thing I need to do, since I have it turned on, so that we can get into some of these, and this is what I was talking about, where it's kind of annoying to come down here. You got to find that and then apply it, and then it'll take it off. So let's go through that process. It's down here, and so now it's not enabled, so I can get in and I can make changes to it. So just so you understand, once it's enabled, it essentially locks it in, so you can't access it unless you disable it, right? Which probably makes sense. Okay, let's start at the very top, because these are some important decisions as you're working through this about how you would like it to operate. And this is an important one, starting right at the top under parameters, the trade entry. So what it's asking you here is, do you want it to enter on the close of the bar, or if a technical event or an event relative to delta, for example, were to happen intra-bar, do you want the auto trader to execute at that instant in time, or do you want it to wait for the close of the bar? Now, I'm not going to tell you one is better than the other. I would just tell you that that's in terms of the forks in the road of the decision matrix you're going to work through here, this would be an important one. My suggestion as you're starting out here would be to keep it on bar close, and then as you get more familiar with it, then perhaps you would do some experimenting with real time. And the drawback to real time, and there's a drawback to each of them. The drawback to real time is that you might, for example, the footprint chart actually might identify a stacked imbalance intra-bar. But then that might reverse, or it might be a delta flip, or any of the delta signals might show up intra-bar, but then before the bar closes, that's no longer the case, where you don't have the delta flip because of the change in the delta intra-bar. You don't have the stacked imbalances. It could be anything that's changing within the course of the bar. And here I'm using a 4,500 tick chart. So looking at a candle like this, I mean, you could have this bar could be 3 different things or 4 different things within the course of the range of those 4,500 ticks. So that's why you have to make this decision here. If those things are happening intra-bar, do you want the auto trader executing off of a phenomenon that it sees intra-bar? You may or may not, right? So now the advantage, if you saw something like that, well, here we've got a stacked imbalance. If you wanted it to enter the market, at the moment that stacked imbalance here is identified, well, then off you are in a short. If you want it to wait for the close of the bar, it's going to wait until this bar closes. It's going to enter the short, in this case, at the open of the next bar. So thus, the trade-off being, if you wait for the close, let's go back to this very tall candle, and let's say this was a stacked imbalance down here, or it would actually be on the buy side. If there was a stacked imbalance down here, and the market rips up, but then comes all the way back down, think about that. So do you want, if it's a stacked imbalance here, do you want to be a buyer here? Well, maybe in this case, since you have this monster bar. But if it's a stacked imbalance up here, do we want to be a buyer up here, intra-bar? Maybe not. So thereby, if the stacked imbalance is up here and I have on bar close, do I want to be a buyer at the open of the next bar, right? I mean, so you can see here where this can be an important decision you're going to have to make, on the close or intra-bar. My suggestion would be start with on the bar close, so that you get, just because this all can be happening very fast depending on the speed of the market. So my suggestion would be to start there and then adjust accordingly as you get more familiar with exactly what it's doing. Okay, so just working through the list. I know this is kind of tedious, but this is the only way to do it. At least we have to have this one resource so you can come back to this and get clarity on this. I will say, in addition to this video here, the content on the web page is pretty extensive, which I would tell you is really kind of an online manual, for lack of a better term, so that you will have a resource to go back to say, wait a second, what was how did it work? You'll have all that information, and we update it pretty consistently and regularly. And again, this video series should be helpful to you. Okay, so just continue down the list. On bar close or real time. First decision you got to make. Maximum number of open trades. So where this would be applicable, let's say you're in a short here, but some signal fires for a long. Do you want it to close the short that you're in and immediately go to the next trade? Or do you want to wait until that trade is either stop or target gets realized, or you exit and then it would then go into the next trade? So one trade at a time is essentially what you're asking it. So if you wanted multiple trades here, exit trade on opposing entry, that's on or off. Just again, part of that decision matrix you're going to make. We're going to include commission. It's up to you, right? We're just using kind of an average figure there. Probably a typical price range for futures traders, but adjust it accordingly to maybe you've got a much better rate, right? Adjust it accordingly. Trace orders, this would be relative to what you'd find in the log. This would be a little bit more related to if you had issues and you're working with someone from our team or from Ninja, and they wanted to dig into the trace and the log files here. So typically you'd leave that off. Skip historical orders. Well, if you turn it on, it's going to slow the process down a little bit, as what it's going to do is go back and look at all the prior trades and mark those for you. So for example, in your data screen, if you wanted to show previous trades, if you wanted to show the trade history, something you might do at the end of the day, and you want all those trades to show up, okay, well then you would leave this turned off, so all the historical trades are going to show. When you're going back and forth on and off of the auto trader throughout the course of the day, that's going to slow it down. So my suggestion would be to leave this checked at the start of your trading day, and then at the end of the day you might uncheck and then go back if you want to review what it did, how it did, your decision about when you went long, when you went short, those kind of things. Then you might turn that back on, then you can go back and review, see how it did. Right, so my suggestion, just for speed at startup, I would keep it off. Right, suggestion. Now, from there we go into a pretty extensive section here about position sizing and your trade management. So within this auto trader, we are disconnecting from the Ninja ATM, and all of your trade management is now internal within the auto trader. So thus we're giving you a lot of flexibility here, comparable to what you'd experience or what you're used to with the Ninja auto trader. So starting right here at position sizing, well, first thing up, we're going to give you some choices. Fixed contracts per trade, fixed amount per trade, put at risk, or percentage per trade, right? Percentage of your account that you would want to put into the trade. Probably best to start. Most of you will be most comfortable with fixed number of contracts. That would be very similar to what you're used to with the Ninja ATM. And in this example here, we're going to use 2 scalps and a single runner. So for this, we'd have number of contracts that are part of the scalp is 2. Now the default here is 20, but make that 200 if you'd like. There's no limit. That's just you can decide here what that limit is here. But again, it's not like it only goes to 20. You decide on that. And then if you're going to be trading with multiple contracts, do you want a scalp runner kind of a scenario? So in this example, we're going to have a total of 3 contracts, 2 scalps, 1 runner. So runner position sizing, again, same choices here. We'll just stick with fixed contracts here. So 2 scalps, 1 runner, again, min max, just that's the default, means nothing more than that. Now, initial stop loss. So this would relate to all 3 of them. When you enter the trade, what's the stop? In this case, I'm going to use a 13 tick stop. Could be ticks, previous bar high low, could be points, could, right, up to you, dollars, ATR, swing high low. Right, lots of choices here in terms of how you're managing the stop. Probably ticks will likely be where people will start. That would be very common. So when you enter the trade, I got a 3 lot going on. What's the stop I'm going to use? Right now we get to make some separation between the scalps and the runners and take profits here. So and for those of you that are experienced working with the ATM, much of this will be self-evident, but let's just go through it so that there's a record here, so we can this would be a place to refer to if you get lost. So for the initial stop loss, that's on all three of them. For the scalp break even, as in at what point in time do you want the stop to go to break even? In this case here, I'm going to use a 5-tick target, which I'll show you in a second. Here's my scalp target. So the scalp target here is 5 ticks. Thus, I want the stop to move to break even when we get to 6 ticks, right? So I can confirm. I know that the fill has happened at 6 ticks because I'm a tick through. So that's a guaranteed fill there. Well, maybe I shouldn't say it that way. You would anticipate that would get filled if we've gone 6 ticks. Guaranteed, maybe the wrong word, although that would be between you and your broker. Anyway, so there's 6 ticks. Now, the runner break even, right? So we're now separating what's happening with stop management between the scalps and the runner. So in this particular case, while we originally started with a 13-tick stop, the scalp, the 2 scalps those two are going to move to break even once we know that the 5-tick target has been achieved, thus 6 ticks. Now that leaves the runner. What are we doing with the runner? Well, you've got choices here about when the runner moves to break even, if ever. So one choice is none. Right? I'm just going to keep that 13-tick stop, and maybe I'll move it manually. It's up to you, right? That's certainly a reasonable choice. Maybe I would do something related in ticks. So when the runner is up 20 ticks at that moment in time, then I want you to move, that's what you're telling the auto trader, move the stop to break even. It could be a risk reward scenario. So when the runner is up 1.5 times the risk at that moment in time, move the runner's stop to break even. And then you could do a tick offset. So you might say, oh, off by 1 tick, just to allow for a little kickback. Right, so lots of choices here. It could be done off of an ATR as well. Okay, well, when we reach 1 ATR on a 14 period with a 2 multiple with a 1 tick offset, that's when we want to go to break even. This is a little bit of experimentation. It's just very, very much up to the individual. Ticks, probably what you're most comfortable with. That would be very similar to what you experienced with the ATM with a Ninja, but we're just giving you some good choices. The risk reward is kind of an interesting scenario. Right, one to keep in mind as a scenario here. I think I'll leave it there for that. So then now we're at take profit. So we just went through this. What do you want for your scalp targets? In this case, I'm using 5. And then do you have a target? Do you want a target? Of course, 1 is none. One choice is none for your runner. Let's not have a target on that. Ticks, percent, dollars, risk reward, just as we were looking at, right? So same idea. Where do you want your risk reward? So, or you might say, well, I want my risk reward at 2 to 1, but I want you to move the stop to break even when I'm up by 1.5 the risk reward. That scenario here, hopefully that starts to make sense. Just another option for you. So we're giving you a lot of flexibility about how you manage your trades. Right? Then trailing stops, we're giving you some different methods here. So let's come down here. So trailing stop, well, okay, scalps, do you want none? Do you want all these choices? Could be ATR, the chandelier stop, a previous high-low, or the parabolic stop and reserve. Stop and reverse. What type of trailing stop would you like? Right? And of course, none is one of those choices. And if you're using the chandelier stop, what period do you want? 14, 1.5, offset of 1 tick. Runner trailing stop, when break even, ATR, same kind of choices, right? Just a lot of flexibility about how you want to manage targets, stops, trailing stops, profit targets, break evens. So just all the flexibility that you might hope for is already built in here. So we bypass all of this, but then give you a lot of control over here. Feel free. This is the kind of thing to do a little experimenting with, and then as you're working with this, I'm going to assume you'll be working in sim as you develop confidence levels with it and some experience with it. This is a great place to do some back testing, see what works best for you. Now we did add in here a daily profit target as well as a daily loss filter. So this you can enable. Right? Essentially, what you're telling it is if it's running and it hits it hits a drawdown of $500, stop. if it hits a target on the day of 1,000, stop. Now these are just defaults, right? You set those based on what you're trading, how you're trading. I'm just giving you an example of how you can set that, right? It'll all happen automatically. When do you want it trading? You can put a session filter on it. So here in this example here, I've just got an RTH, so same hours here, right? So that'll be consistent. Days of the week. Footprint settings. Okay, so now we're getting into how do you want the footprint set up. Now this is, we're kind of getting a little bit into the interaction between the footprint indicator and the footprint auto trader. So you have some choices here in terms of how you want the delta to be shown. Now, for the vast majority of you, it's going to be bid ask, but there are some places in around the world where they don't offer bid ask, where you'd only I think it's let's see, maybe India. I think it's in India where they don't give you a bid ask. You'd only get an uptick, downtick, or a tick count. So for international traders that can't have access to bid ask, we put that in there so at least you'd have an option. Oops, let's get Saturday off of that. Now, grouping number of ticks, and I would refer you also to the website on this. So, for example, if you were trading a 5-minute on the NQ, the range of the bar and because of the speed and the number of trades that are going on in there, it can't you get the numbers can be so big it's very hard to discern what's actually happening in there. So we're giving you the capability. This is actually something that we offer in the footprint chart as well, to group the ticks together. So a 5-minute on the NQ, you might group those 5, 10 ticks together, so you don't get just a huge bar with so much volume in it you can't see it. The examples on the website will give you clarity here, and it may or may not be something that you want to use, depending on what type of bar you're using. If you're using a time-based bar, that might be appropriate. If you're using a range bar, may not be a necessity. But if you go out to larger time frames, which I think is an underappreciated way to use a footprint chart. So if you went, for example, to a 5-minute, well, certainly you're slowing things down, but again, the amount of volume that you're going to see at any different bid-ask level here can be difficult because the volume is so high. So that's the point there, is to just clean up the chart and see what's happening intra-bar a little bit more cleanly. That's just an option. It's personal preference. Okay, so so we're at whether we're grouping here in this particular case. I'm not enabling that. Now, trade filters, this would be very common with regards to the amount of volume. It could be depending on what you're trading or the time that you're trading. So this may not be something that you would worry about during the RTH session of the ES, but if you were trading European hours, or for whatever reason here, if you said, okay, well, I've got these periods of very low volume, so I want to put a filter on the auto trader so that it's not taking low volume signals, because while technically the event might be a delta signal is happening, the volume is so low that you don't actually want it to enter the trade. So in this particular case, it might be nothing below 500 contracts being traded, which would be pretty high, particularly for overnight hours. But again, it's just an option, and it could be during the day. I don't want any periods. I don't want to take any trades where the size is less than 500. I said, again, it doesn't have to be 500. That's just the default. We'll let you tweak to your heart's content there based on what you prefer. The value area, that's a function. That's the value area of the candle, right? Value area percentage. So that would be the default. I don't see any reason to change that. Volume sequencing thread, the imbalance percent. This is very common. Again, this is up to your heart's content. Whatever you want to change here, you might want that to be 400 for an imbalance, 500. Up to you. That's just a place. This is just the default. That's really all I'm telling you. Here's the default, right? Tweak accordingly. Minimum imbalance, right? You might want to change that and maybe take that up to 10, 20, 300. Again, it's up to you. I'm just kind of showing you what's here, and then you have the option to tweak these accordingly. And you might do some experimenting here within the footprint settings. Save them as different templates, right? Bring it up, see which one you like best. Okay, now we're kind of into what's happening intra-candle here. So imbalance percent, minimum imbalance volume. So we don't want to, if there's a zero print, we don't want to, we want to factor that out. Oversized imbalance percent. Well, you can see here, you're seeing that down here with an example here where we see over 1,000 gets accented here with different colors. Again, these are the default levels, but probably a good starting point. Big imbalance level at 1300, right? You'll get a stronger color there. Minimum multiple imbalance count 3. We have this on the stacked imbalances. You can change that if you'd like. And an extreme delta here where you're going to get notification of let's see if I've got anything. Well, here's one where you've got very high delta. So 750 being a minimum to identify as extreme delta. Again, this is just the default tweak. Make it 1200, 1500, 5, whatever you'd like. Again, these are good. These will be good starting points, nothing more. Okay, then we're coming down here. So footprint signals. Now within this is the really where we get into the interaction between the footprint indicator and the footprint auto trader. All right, so what is it that we want to have the auto trader identifying and trading? Well, we're giving you a couple of different ways that you can access this. So one, of course, is in the parameters of the auto trader. So here I have it just set. So we're going to look at the delta drop surge, right? So it's just the inverse of each thing. So a delta drop or a delta surge. We'll go over what those are here, and then a delta flip, which is you see them, right? Or a delta reversal. These don't happen that often. Probably the most common would be a delta divergence. But we're just going to isolate this here. These could all be off here, and then you could turn them on. You could choose what you want here in the auto trader on the big trading panel here. But I'm just showing you here that I think in the default they may all be on, or pardon me, in what you would download here in the default setting. This is just a place where you can, if you wanted to, turn everything on, but then you're going to have a drop-down menu to turn them off as well. So this is just more control over what you're going to see. That will make more sense when I turn it back on. These are all of the delta signals or the types of signals, including, and this is significant because this is my partner is very proud of this feature here. So you can create your own custom signals here. So we're giving you fairly well established types of delta signals that footprint traders have identified for many, many years. We're not revolutionizing footprint trading here. These are common occurrences that footprint traders will identify, right? And again, the value add here is rather than you trying to identify, okay, what do I have? Let me add up. Is that a surge? Okay, so the last 3 bars, I need increasing delta. I've got here all in that period of time where you're saying, oh, it is a surge. And by that time, the price is already down here. So the software is going to do it for you instantaneously, so you're not going to miss it. And you can create whatever you'd like. Now this does require just a tiny little bit of code knowledge here. It's not overly complicated. You could probably just deduce from reading the way with the example we have in here. You can probably kind of back end your way into figuring out how to do this. If not, there's lots of sources to get a little help on doing just a small snippet of code like that. We may even make some of these available. Based on whether or not there's a lot of demand for it. But we are giving you, those of you that have just basic knowledge of how to do any C# coding within Ninja here, this will give you a lot of flexibility here. Delta traps, that's one we just added. That is now on the website as well. And then prominent POCs, we'll go over that. So these are all the types of signals that you can tell the auto trader to identify and then trade accordingly, right? So for example, if it identifies a delta surge, since at the very top, right, remember at the very top we said, okay, on the bar close. So if it identifies a delta surge at the open of the next bar, I want you to enter the market. Or if it identifies a delta surge in real time, as soon as it's identified, I want you to enter the market. It's nuanced but significant. All right, so do a little experimenting with that. Again, my suggestion would be while you're first learning this and doing your testing, let's keep that off. Skip. I would suggest do it on bar close until you get really, really comfortable with it. Then, right? So what you're doing is you're increasing the risk. Well, that's open to interpretation. My suggestion is until you're completely comfortable and know exactly what it's doing and when it's doing it and why it's doing it, I'd keep it on bar close. Just a suggestion. Right, nothing more. Footprint settings down here, we just went through that. What do we want to see? There's multiple ways to get to that. We'll once we apply it, you'll see what I mean there. Volume and delta filters, right? These are going to be off just by default. Do you want to put any particular filters on this? So, if I don't see a delta X or a minimum percentage of Y, then don't take the trade. Right, up to you as to how you want to define those. And then the rest of this all down here is just the native Ninja related content, data source, setup, historical fill, order handling. This would be the common with any indicator. So it's nothing specific to our strategy here. Again, it's just default Ninja stuff. The core of this is going to be, well, the first fork in the road, real time or on bar close, and then the position and trade management, and then the signals. What do you want it to identify and trade off of? All right, so let's do this. So let's with all of that identified here, and I think we've been through everything. Okay, so let's enable it now and apply it. Right? Again, this is just one way to do it. Remember, we could also enable it over here on your control panel. Nice faster way to do it. Okay, so now as we have it up here, let's just quickly recap here. So this I'm just using this. I'm recording this on Saturday the 10th. This is Friday the 9th market. Again, this is RTH only. So and on the chart, I should note here, I have nothing but our footprint indicator, our initial balance indicator, right? Anyone who's watched any of these videos know that I would tell you that those are the two most important levels on the board. I would add VWAP into that, but these two, I'll tell you, well, if you're not paying attention to those, I would encourage you to reconsider that. Okay, so if you don't have ours on, have somebody's initial balance on, or draw them yourself. Right, again, two most important levels on the board. Okay, so here we have, and then I have our toolbar up here because I use that. There's no chart I don't have the toolbar on because I use it so much. The footprint indicator with the table underneath. So we have the footprint indicator applied, and then the auto trader of the footprint indicator running over here on the trade panel. So with all of that, now if we wanted to get into some of the particulars of how we're going to trade this, I'm going to pause here as I'm going to take you through the drop down here, and then we'll come into we'll isolate this as kind of setup, and then we'll go into application. So in the footprint drop down here, so I've got a lot of choices here, and again we're looking at the interaction between the indicator, what I want to see on the chart, and then how I want it to trade based on the auto trader. So lots of choices here. Right? Anyone who owns the footprint indicator, no, this is just a lot of flexibility here we're giving you, and you don't have to open the indicator and go into the footprint. That's the advantage of the drop down. Okay, all of this stuff. Right, this is all just personal preference. What do you want? Do you want it to see all of this? Do you want the bar stats, right, above, below? Do you want the bar value? Do you want the last traded tick? These are all just nuances within the footprint indicator that if, for example, you weren't sure, like, what is that last traded tick thing? Why do I want that? Well, all right, first thing you would want to do is go over to the, just pop it down here, because you have an online manual essentially right here. All right, so if we wanted to see what some of those things are, well, you got a whole lot of content here. So this is different types of layouts that you'll have. Remember, we were talking about tick aggregation. So here's a 5 minute, just a good example here. Here's a 5 minute of the NQ where you've got just massive range here. Here it is if I've done 6 ticks of aggregation. Right, just cleans it up. I can see it a little bit better. Show last traded tick. Right, we were just talking about that. So what it's going to do is it's going to show you, it's going to highlight the last traded tick. Right, kind of handy as to whether or not you'd like that. So you again, and then all of the little, what was that prominent POC again? Oh, how does that work? Right, so you've got an online manual here. Some of the things that we've just talked about. Now, what do we want for the value area? Do I want to color those based on the candle close? Thin prints, what are those again? Well, here, right? So if you had a volume filter on it, right, you're going to filter those out. Exhaustion prints, volume sequencing, right? You'll see that this is for something we've recently added here. So we see progressive increases, right, in the bid-ask spread. Bar statistics, that's just whether you want to see them above and below the bar, or whether you want to see them down below, or whether you want to see both. We're kind of going through, we're still into setup here. Big trades, right? This is something people like to do. Just to show me only trades, in this particular case, I think this is at 750. So only trades where you're seeing 750 or greater volume. As a matter of fact, I have Have an example of that over here, which I'll bring over. Some people like to do this just to identify those locations where there might be some support or resistance. So here's our open. So in the initial opening range, we don't have a single bar where we get greater. Oh, I think this one's set at 500 plus until we get here where we get an 800 and a 500 lot, and then it just draws a bar here, so you're identified to where those locations are. Interestingly, all the big volume, because this is an RTH as well, this is all tied to yesterday, right? So when it came up here, right, are they still there? Question mark, right? And then you get a few of them here later in the day as we went through. This was the push that got through the IB here. So you see push, big size. When they're going to break the IB, they need this kind of muscle to do it, right? So big size. Can't hold it. Down we go. So just that's an example of how that can be shown to you. A lot of traders like to keep that as kind of on a separate, as I just showed you, so you can identify quickly. Right now, you can also put it on your chart, but you can get lost in all of the things that can be on there because you got a lot of choices. And then something that we've done recently here, which many of you may not be familiar with, is rather than just identifying the signals as we did previously in an earlier version, where you would just get like an S for a delta surge. A little tricky, because then you're like, oh, wait a minute, what S was that? Was that a surge? And then D, what's a T? What was that? T was tail. A little bit tricky here. So to identify them, we're putting stripes on it so you don't miss it, so that you know. So what you're going to see is that you have in this case, you have delta divergence, but it's going to put a stripe on that candle. So when you come back and look at this, as you get more familiar with these signals, you go, oh, there it is. I see it. Okay, I had a new high, but closed on the low. So I've got delta divergence, so it's going to highlight that candle for you. Footprint summary, and then these colors can be set to your liking. How do you want to like them? So here you're seeing these big percentages here are being highlighted here, or going to a max or a min at 0.1. That's the market is talking to you there. So that might be something that you would want to emphasize, and as in our defaults, we're giving you some starting points there, but that's a good example of how that might play. And then within the footprint summary, so you see here they stand out. So I can see here, man, what's going on here? Well, my minimum delta was only 1 here. Oh, interesting. Okay, so a lot of choices about how you tune this to your liking. All right, then we'll see here where we talk about imbalances, multiple imbalances, oversized imbalances, and then stacked imbalances, which are always going to get a stripe here to identify them, right? Well, they got to be stacked 3 on top of each other. Well, pardon me. You can identify that. You can change that to whatever you like. In the default, we have it as 3 or more. Right? Inverse imbalances, right? Essentially trap traders. So big push here, size comes in at the low, the market takes off, trap traders, right? Big imbalances. Seconds here, these don't happen very often. You've got an inverse imbalance and then a big imbalance here. These are rare where you see this massive imbalance, but that's again market talking to you. A second slot imbalance, right? So the auction finishes up here, we get an imbalance at the second slot. Can be meaningful, and then all of your delta signals. So the reason I'm taking you through this here is because you're going to need to refer back and forth to those. Because over here, you're going to be looking at this going, okay, so stacked imbalances. If I turn that on, okay, what is that exactly telling me? Well, here you see a stacked imbalance right here where we have a stacked imbalance here at the low. Well, this is an interesting example. Okay, so here we have a stacked imbalance at the low. Okay, so in this case, if you had this turned on to take trades in real time, that's working in your favor. If you have it set to only enter after a stacked imbalance at the close/open of the next bar, maybe that didn't work for you. Right? Obviously, in this case, it didn't. So buy it here real time, probably made some money. Buy it here open in the next bar, stopped out pretty quickly. But note where we are. Now, that 945, that's not the initial bounce. All that is just a double top. Right? It's not until we get later in the day that you get the actual test and break of the IB. Okay, right, so I don't want to digress into that, but just so you understand those distinctions, it's going to be important that you're clear in your mind before you're turning any of this on exactly what you're doing and what you're telling it to do. Again, let me reemphasize this. You cannot, don't do this. Well, you mean you do it in sim just to see it. Don't turn all these on, long or short, and just let it run. Right, well, again, if you wanted to do it just to see the result, I sincerely doubt you're going to come out with a positive result. That's not how this is designed to be used. Emphasis. That's not what it's designed to do. It's not a black box, turn it on and make money. This is very much about trader assist. That's probably the best way to describe it. Auto trader. We may have to change that name because it is, but it's mindful auto trading, if you will. Okay, I think we've covered all the parameters here. Again, you've got all the detail on the website that's again acting as a bit of a manual for you, as well as all the details on the Auto Trader page. So you've got a lot of resources here, places to refer to, and then of course our now the Trade Devils Indicator Discord is very active, and I'm sure this will get a lot of attention as people start working with it and finding settings and things they like. You find it's a very generous community, people sharing ideas and settings and tweaks and things that they've found. So you're going to have a lot of information to help you harness the full power of this. I would tell you I'm very excited about this. I think this is going to help a lot of people get better results. So with that, I'm going to wrap this first one here, and then we'll as we go through a little series here, we'll get into more trade application and some examples of where you can see this thing firing and how it can really be useful to you. Okay, with that, I'll wrap here, and we'll be back in part 2.